We're sitting in the patio of Stirling Dickinson's beautiful orchid garden, and I'd like to ask you, Stirling, uh, how did you happen to get involved in San Miguel? How did you happen to come here?
Well, it's rather a silly story in a way. In 1935, a college friend and I decided we want to come to Mexico. We'd heard it was an interesting country, of course.
Yeah.
So we bought an old Ford for $75, Model A, and we started out for Mexico. We crossed the border at Laredo, and we started down what was going to be the Pan American Highway, but it wasn't finished.
Yeah.
And we had quite a time getting around because we came to places where they dynamited, and at one point they had to literally pick up my car and carry it across the hole that they just dynamited. But we got eventually down to Mexico City, and we made several side trips out from Mexico City. But we couldn't go many places because, like, going to Guadalajara was impossible.
You mean you couldn't get from Mexico City to Guadalajara?
No, not by car.
In 1935?
No,
Fascinating.
no way.
I see.
And it was just a dirt track the cows would have used.
Yeah. What college was it? What college was it that...
Princeton University.
Was it at Princeton?
Yeah.
I see. Interesting.
Anyway, one day we decided we wanted to go to Oaxaca.
Yeah.
And there was no road to Oaxaca either, so we took the train.
I see.
And somewhere about halfway between Oaxaca and Mexico City, I got off the train to buy some fruit in the railway station. And while I was buying the fruit, a very handsome Mexican came up to me, and he looked at me and said in perfect English, "You're American, aren't you?" And I looked at him, and I'd been to the Chicago Civic Opera many times, and I said, "Yes, and I know you're Jose Mojica, the opera singer and movie star, because I've heard you sing in Chicago with Mary Garden, and I've also seen some of your movies made in MGM in Hollywood." And we talked briefly and went on. And we said goodbye, and that was that. About 6 weeks later, we were leaving Mexico in our Ford, trying to drive north through the central part of the country now. And we went to a bullfight in Querétaro in honor of the new governor. And Jose Mojica was sitting in the governor's box. And that night we were walking around the plaza and ran into him. And we said, "What in the world are you doing so far from Oaxaca?" And he said, "Well, I'm on our way to see a town called San Miguel Allende, which I've never seen, but I'm looking for a place in Mexico where I can retire when I finish making movies and where my mother can have a home because she's quite old now." Well, he invited us to join him, but we didn't have time. We said, "Oh, sorry, we can't do it. We've got to continue on." And we bypassed San Miguel by way of Celaya and went on north. Well, we did a book about the thing after we got home, and it was accepted for publication. Came out in 1935, called Mexican Odyssey, and had a very nice success. The first edition sold out in 12 days, and it had three more editions very quickly.
And excuse me, was this when you were a student at Princeton?
No, I'd graduated before, about 5 years before,
I see.
and had gone to the Chicago Art Institute for 3 years after that.
I see.
Then the following year, we went to South America and did a book about a trip across South America using all kinds of transportation, walking and going down a riverboat and everything else. And we did a book, as I say, about that, which was called Westward from Rio. And then in 1937, we wanted to come back to Mexico. Well, Jose Mojica, we had originally gotten him back in 1935 to write a foreword to our first book. A very nice foreword. And we'd never heard anything from him since, however. But this time I decided, well, I wonder if that man Mojica ever went down to a place called San Miguel Allende. We had no idea. So I sat down to the typewriter and I wrote a letter, Jose Mojica, MGM, Hollywood, California. And damned if I didn't get a letter back saying, "I'm out here, and why don't you come down and look over San Miguel Allende? Because I've got a home there now. And I think you'll find lots of material because it's right next to Dolores Hidalgo, which is the birthplace of Mexican independence." So we got on the train because there was still no way of getting to San Miguel otherwise. San Miguel was isolated completely. And we got off the train about 5 o'clock in the morning. We were the only two people getting off. There was not another human being in the railway station. We wondered where we were because, of course, the town is not at the railway station. But at that moment, we heard a funny little tinkling bells, and down between the pirul trees came a funny little cart, glass enclosed, drawn by 3 mules. And that was the way you went up to San Miguel. They came down to meet every train. In this case, they just met us. And we got in this little cart, and the mules began pulling us up the hill into San Miguel.
Was the station where it is now?
Oh, exactly.
The same location?
same station, everything.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, same place.
So you got in the cart.
Yeah, we got in, and then as we came up, we hit the plaza about, well, it must have been maybe 5:45, and it was a heavy fog, but there was just beginning to be enough light, and I looked up and saw the parochia sticking out of the fog, and I said, my gosh, what a place. And I think I must have decided at that minute I was going to stay here, because 10 days later I bought the house I'm living in right now, where you're sitting.
Isn't it? That's fascinating.
And all because I got off the train going to Oaxaca to buy some fruit.
And met Jose
Yeah,
Mojica.
because otherwise we never would have been here, I'm sure. Had a few tanneries in this part of the town, including several above me, and one of them is still operating. Today there are none left at all. But I bought this place as a ruin, and I just happened to look through the door, which is half filled with adobes, one day when I was walking up 10 days after I reached San Miguel back in 1937. I thought it looked very interesting, so I found out who the owner was, a little man, I think his name was Martinez, and we negotiated, and the negotiation resulted in my buying this half of the property for $90, or 250 pesos.
And people thought that you were
No,
outrageously cheated?
nobody said anything about that. That was all right.
That was all right, was it?
And I started work on it, fixing it up little by little.
Yes.
And then I decided I didn't want anybody buying the piece in front, because it would be sort of unpleasant looking across the ravine at somebody else, like an old Mexican general or someone. So I asked about the piece of property in front, and I found out that that belonged to, I think it was Padre Mercadillo. And he wanted $130 for it. So I bought it around, with real estate agents or anything of that nature. Anything you wanted to do, you did on your own, and usually it worked out pretty well.
Could you tell me about Jose Mojica just a little bit? I mean, did he have a house in
Yes, he had
San
a very
Miguel?
lovely home on right out Juarez Park.
Is that right?
On one side, now it's that hotel out there, a small hotel.
Santa Monica?
Santa Monica, yeah.
That was his house.
Yeah, that was his house. He had a big grand piano, and I used to go to luncheon parties there, and he would sing for us, of course, after luncheon or before luncheon, and it was always fascinating. He had a beautiful voice. Really very fine tenor voice, not big enough like Caruso to be a top-notch leading tenor maybe, but certainly he was a good actor and handsome, and everybody found him very, very good in opera and in the movies.
Fascinating, yeah.
And then, of course, I started building the place here. I got it, as I think I already told you, for $90, and they later added the part with the $130, and my orchid collection began about 1940-something, and then has grown ever since.
Were your parents interested in orchids too? Is that how you happened to get it?
We were always interested in gardening. My mother and father, we had a place up in Michigan where we went in the summer from Chicago, and my mother and father were wildly enthusiastic gardeners, but mainly they came down, they loved Mexico. They came to Mexico in 1932, I think it was, 3 years before I ever saw the country.
Really?
And they loved it. That's why I came down here, because they said, you've got to go and see this place, Stirling. And every year since I began coming here, they came down and visited me automatically every winter, spent a month here approximately, and often they went off afterwards and saw some other part of Mexico. And that's why I started the collection, because on one of their trips, they went to Fortín de las Flores, which is a great orchid country, and they put 2 little orchid plants in a cardboard box and sent them back to me. Well, I'd never seen an orchid plant. I had no idea what it was, but I sort of had in the back of my mind it grew in water. Which was the craziest idea you ever heard. But anyway, I made some little rafts, and I tied the orchids to the little rafts and floated them in water. Well, of course, that finished the orchids off right away. And then I remembered that they didn't like sun, so I figured if I had a dark place down in the lower garden, so I found the pitch dark place down there, and I put the orchids there. Well, of course, they didn't like that any better. They didn't die, but they didn't flower. And all that made me mad. So then I got a couple of books on orchids, and I got really hooked. Because then I started realizing that it took a little different sort of treatment than floating him on water or putting him in a dark hole in the garden.
And
as you can see, it's been rather a bad disease. It's grown on me terribly. I got 2 orchid plants, and I think it's my mother and father gave them to me. And then really good ones.
Again, this?
Yeah, that's a very nice Cymbidium. It's a hybrid, of course, but my specialty really are species, Mexican species, and right now I'm making seed pods on as many of them as I can and sending the seed up to the United States. And there's a big company up there now, it's rather new, that is growing seeds from all over Mexico, wherever I can get seeds for them. and I've sent quite a lot already. And they already told me the other day that they now have something like 5,000 plants of one of the ones I sent them.
You mean, so these can be
Because
grown
these are
in
all
the
endangered species. These are species which probably in another 10 years wouldn't even be in Mexico.
States? Is that right?
And it's the only way of saving them because they cut the trees down here so fast
Oh,
that there are very few orchids left.
I see, I see. It's a result of deforestation.
Yeah, and also forest fires and people collecting them too much and that sort of thing, but mostly because they cut the trees down.
Yeah. So now people can grow these in
Oh yeah,
the
you can
United
grow them
States?
sure, you can grow them in agar solution. It's sort of like a gelatin. You put the seed on that. I've got
see.
lots more coming, you know. So a purple orchid that grows down on the Guatemala border inside Mexico. It's a very lovely thing, but most of them, of course, are purple. But this particular plant happens to be white. I got a very small piece of it several years ago, and it's grown like topsy. As you can see, it's a great big plant over here now. In fact, I'm going to have to divide it very shortly. I have other albinos. That's sort of a specialty of mine because they're extremely rare.
Would you mind telling me the name of the company in the States?
It's the Hoosier Orchid Company of Indianapolis.
I see. Good.
And they've just recently started this program of taking seed if anybody wants to send it to them
Really?
and sowing it for them. And then you're entitled to, I believe, 50% or something like that of the growing plants.
Oh,
And the rest of them they keep or they sell or they distribute. Now, of course, in my case, I don't want any more orchids like a hole in my head. But yeah, what I'm hoping is that there will be some ecological groups here in Mexico with parks, national parks, state parks, that sort of thing. And I can provide plants then to them if they want them by writing this company, and they will send them down to the border, and I can get them easily across.
that's it.
And then we can put them back in the trees that are protected.
Wonderful.
Because otherwise, you're just wasting your time to stick them out in the wild. Because next day somebody's going to come along with a saw.
Yeah, cut
and,
down the tree.
That's the end of it.
Yeah. What arrangements have you made to keep this garden going?
Well, after I'm gone, I'm giving it to a group here, I think, called Conte. They're an ecological group with apparently quite a bit of money behind them.
Yeah.
They're doing a park above town now, but I'm going to give them this whole piece of property on this side of the ravine
I see.
to be turned into a city park.
Wonderful.
They will be in charge of it, and they will have other things beside orchids.
I see.
They'll probably have a cactus garden and maybe a rose garden. I don't really know what they'll do.
I see.
But the orchids will be kept intact. Now that's one of the
Conditions, is it?
yeah, one of the things that they have to do
I see.
is keep the orchid collection total.
I see.
And I'll keep my gardener here if he's still alive,
Yeah.
and so on.
So the group is called Conte, is that?
Yeah.
Is that from Mexico City?
Well, they're basically out here, but they have a group in Mexico, I think, too.
I see.
And they're doing quite a big park project up here on the that very interesting canyon above park off to the left here
Really?
of the Atascadero.
Hmm.
And they are putting in plants of one type or another and paths, and they're fencing the whole property in. I believe they expect to put some animals in like deer, and in general really do a good job of
Wonderful.
Right.
That doesn't have anything to do with the Audubon Society?
no, they work together in a
It's the
sense,
same
yes,
type
but
of
oh yeah,
group.
same type of thing very much.
Why don't-
That's something which more or less makes them grow.
So it really is you have to work take some doing to get the moisture in here. Then.
Yeah, it does, because you can't use an ordinary humidifier. I brought
Really?
one down from the States years ago. It was a total loss
Really?
because,
Why is that?
well, the water here is very, very full of alkaline.
Uh-huh.
And the minute you put in a humidifier, it all gets clogged up within 2 or 3 months. You can clean it out, but it drives you crazy.
I see.
No, what I do now, you'll see in one of these houses now.
Looking in this direction.
Well, it works pretty well. It isn't, of course, as good as a real humidifier, but
I think it's better.
no, because the other sends out mist, and that probably is a little bit more to the point, but on the whole, it's
I love it.
interesting little orchid up there.
Yeah.
That came down in the mountains of Oaxaca years ago, and now I found a few plants growing over here in the mountains of Guanajuato. Nobody had any idea it grew within 1,000 miles of here. And I was over in the mountains near Sichu, And we looked up, and there was this little pink thing on the tree. So this was about 5-6 years ago, and it's going to be a beautiful flower in just another couple of weeks.
That's interesting. Most of these then grow on trees, is that?
Many do, yes. Not all. There are ground orchids too, a great many ground orchids. You see, we have about 800 orchids in Mexico.
Is that right?
And that's a lot of orchids.
But you specialize in the Mexican orchids.
Yes, I do have a lot of things from other parts too, because with my travels in Nepal, I took 6 walking trips in Nepal, for instance, a month long each time.
Really?
And Thailand and Africa and
Really?
Bali and South America, of course, and so on. And I've always tried to bring back at least one reminder of the trip. It's an orchid.
And tell us about that.
Well, it grows down in the south of Mexico, in the state of Chiapas, and likes to grow on trees with lots of moss. And it's very easy to grow here. I'm often surprised how many orchids can adjust quite well to a different altitude. Now there's a few that don't, but I have a great many here in my collection, for instance, that come from Yucatan and Quintana Roo, places like that, where it's a great deal hotter than San Miguel. And nevertheless, they do very well here. Maybe they like it better than Yucatan. They just didn't get a start here in the first place. I got one little piece in my suitcase about the size of this, almost exactly that size. And I have had this and that and that and that. I must have had 20 plants by now, all from the original plant.
As a cutting.
In Singapore, they grow it in the open fields like corn, and then they sell the flowers. They ship them all over the world because it's a very long-lasting flower, very firm. You can't do any damage to it. It doesn't collapse, and it's very, very satisfactory for corsages and that sort of thing. So I'm very glad to have. Chop it off here, put this half in one pot, leave the other half, and then make some more plants down here.
So you take,
It just multiplies all year round.
so wherever you see a root growing out, you cut it off below the root and take that section.
Yeah, I cut it off somewhere about half, and plant the upper half, and let the lower half grow, and it comes up again. If I didn't have enough trouble taking care of the orchids, I now started hybrid irises. I got a couple. You want to go down in there and take
Those
them?
are incredible.
I got them from a lady in California.
Really?
She sent me the roots, and several times, and I've just been putting them in. I don't know a blessed thing about it.
The interview was continued on the patio with a discussion of the origins of the Instituto Allende.
Was the Instituto in business when you came to San Miguel? Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know that you've been associated with the Instituto so long.
Yes, well, there was nothing here, of course. I was the only American in town. There actually was one other man named Mr. Beckman, who was a silversmith and repaired watches, actually. And he was married to a Mexican. He was here before I came, so I can't really claim to be absolutely the first American, but almost, you might say. No, there was nothing here at all, of course. No foreigners of any kind. And then we started. I met a Peruvian named Cosillo del Pomar, came to San Miguel. And he asked me if I would join him in starting an art school. And he got a building over near the market for the first year of the school, which was 1938. We just had a summer school running for 2 months, that's all it was. And then the following year, he managed to talk to the governor, and we got what is now Bellas Artes. And then for a good many years, we were there in Bellas Artes. And then in 1951, Cosillo del Pomar had left San Miguel and gone back to his native country of Peru. But then he came back to San Miguel when he found that the Peruvian situation wasn't satisfactory for him, and joined hands with Enrique Fernandez Martinez, the ex-governor of the state. And between the two of them, they rebuilt the Count of La Canal building. And,
where the Instituto is now.
Yeah, so we closed the school we were running at the time up near the market.
I see.
And we moved into the Instituto.
What year was that?
1951.
You've done quite a bit of work with rural schools, haven't you, Stirling?
Yeah,
How did you?
Yes, of course, during the time I was working with the Instituto, I didn't have a chance to do as much as I would like to do, but today, since I'm really semi-retired at least, maybe almost fully retired now.
I would disagree with that.
Well, I mean in the sense of giving classes,
Oh.
you know, and being down at the school all day, because for many, many years I went at 9 o'clock in the morning and came home for lunch and went back at 3 in the afternoon
Really?
and didn't get out till 6. But I don't do that anymore, which I'm very glad of, because it's a rather boring existence. No, today I'm doing a lot of more work now. I go out to the ranches. I have about 208 schools now altogether, including kindergartens out on ranches, and I have visited all of them many times. I've just finished my 1,500th trip, I think, to ranches, which accounts for the fact that every 3 years I have to buy a new car because the roads are simply terrible. I mean, really terrible. Some of them I can't even find now, having been there 8 or 10 times. You get to a place with 3 different forks, and you have to remember, no, it was the left fork, no, it was the right fork, no, it was the center fork, and you always end up by taking the wrong one. But anyway, it's very rewarding because we do for the Patronato Pro Niños, of which I'm a member of the board. I deliver shoes, and I also serve out medical slips, because that's the most important thing I think we do, because there are a great, great many kids on the ranches who never have a chance to see a doctor, and who have all kinds of medical problems which could be taken care of, but never have been and never will be unless somebody does something.
That's right.
So I get kids with cleft lips, hair lips. I get lots of epilepsy, lots of cases of bones that weren't set properly, club feet, crossed eyes, a great many, all kinds of other problems, skin diseases by the thousand, a great many things like that. Then in addition, of course, for the bibliothèque, I'm delivering books all the time, because they have a marvelous book program. They provide me with a great number of books, and we deliver them to each one of the schools. So each one now has a small library of maybe 150 books.
Really?
And now, right now, as you can see by looking in behind you in my living room, I've got a lot of bookcases, because I discovered that they've gotten so many books over the year, not only from us but from the government, they don't have any place to put them. And they have them in boxes, cardboard boxes, and on the floor and things like that, which isn't good for them. So now we're giving them a bookcase apiece, and we'll eventually, I hope, really have a pretty nice setup for them.
So you really visit 208 schools in the course of a year, is that it?
Well, I can't always get to all 208 in 1 year. No, that would be beyond the call of duty, as they
I
say.
would think so.
No, I do as many as I can, and when I can't visit a school and we have some new books for them, I simply send them a letter saying, please come into the library and pick them up. And they do.
I see.
And the same thing is true as far as the medical slips are concerned, because I
see.
can't cover all the... But they all know now that they can go to the biblioteca, where we have a large stack of medical slips, and our bibliotecario serves out the slips to anybody who comes in.
Wonderful, that's a...
They also come up to my house quite often, I might add, and they come a great deal to the house of Mrs. Velty, who heads the program.
Oh, Louisa is...
Louise is the head of the program
of the
medical.
For the Patronato, is
Yeah,
that...
she's the head of the medical
see.
slips and does a marvelous job.
Well, sure. Looking at your cap it reminds me of the stories that I've heard about you as a baseball player. Now, could you either disabuse us or tell us...
No, I won't disabuse you, because I've always been very, very fond of baseball, and still am.
Yeah.
I try to get it on TV as much as I can in the evenings.
Yeah.
No, very soon after I came to San Miguel, I found that there was some interest in baseball. In fact, there was one team out at the factory here, small one, and I started a team almost immediately, and later on we sort of merged. And so my team was really the only one in San Miguel for many years. And we played baseball all over the state of Guanajuato. And if I may be pardoned for being rather boastful, we did very, very well. At one point we won 84 games without losing one.
Good heavens, that's almost a record, isn't it?
Well, I think it must be more or less. I haven't written Mr. Guinness about putting it in the Guinness book, but
That's wonderful.
the last thing we did before I retired really from running the team was to go to Querétaro and enter a championship in Querétaro, and we won 18 straight games, and that was the championship.
My God.
What position did you play?
Well, I played when I played. I didn't always play. I played first base usually, although occasionally the outfield, but mostly first base.
Did you play in Princeton?
No,
No,
I really picked up baseball down here.
Really?
And but I didn't ever claim to be any Joey DiMaggio or anything like that, but I always enjoyed it. But my main job was managing the team, and we practiced a lot, because that really accounts, I think, for our success. And I did have a good deal of background knowledge of baseball tactics, which I must say most of the teams in the state didn't have. And so we had a lot of fun, although when I was 50 years old, I played 19 innings in a town over here. I didn't intend to play that Sunday at all, but when I came down to pick up the team, there were only 8 players, and then somebody said, oh, well, there are a couple more going to be waiting on the edge of town. Well, there was nobody there when we got to the edge of town, so all the players said, oh, come on, this is not a difficult team to beat. So we went over there and we played 19 innings, because the first game we won very handily, 9-0. And the second game, we came up against a left-handed submarine pitcher. None of us had ever seen a left-handed submarine pitcher before, and he absolutely murdered us. And the game went into the 9th inning, tied 1-1. I drove in the only run we made in that first 9 innings, and then we broke it open in the 10th inning and won 3-1. But I didn't have any intention of playing at all, and I ended up by playing 19 innings. Well, I've had a lot of fun with baseball. I was very happy to be able to do something for baseball here in a permanent nature just a few years ago, because we had been shoved from pillar to post, more or less, all over town. As soon as I finished a baseball field, the city took it away and put something else there. We started out at the Aurora factory, which is now a housing development. Then we moved across from the Instituto, which is now the Aldea. Then we moved out to where the new school, Fuego Nuevo, is, and I bulldozed the side of the hill there. And they took it away from me as fast as I got it ready. And then they gave me a piece behind the cemetery, and then they found the cemetery was too small, so they took that away. And at that point, I said, I give up. But fortunately, we had a mayor in town a few years ago who said he had some property that was going to be a part of a sports unit up on top. So we went and asked him to give us that, and he did. And I got a very good Mexican friend here, a very amusing little man called Guillermo Sanchez. He and I went all over town, visiting every single commercial establishment in town, restaurants, hardware stores, you name it. And they were all most cooperative. They all chipped in and gave us an ad for the wall which I wanted to build around the 2 fields. And today we have 2 completely enclosed baseball fields, one of which has a small stadium with a roof over it, and we're just putting in bathrooms right now. And it really is going to be a very nice permanent contribution, I think, to the sports community.
Oh, that's wonderful. Very nice. You must have thought quite a bit about all the changes that have been taking place in San Miguel, both political and architectural and everything else. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, needless to say, I've seen a colossal amount of change here in San Miguel, because when I came here, for instance, there was one taxi cab which had air in 3 tires and sawdust in the 4th. The man couldn't afford a 4th tire. So. And poor Lino, his name was Lino, would go down and meet the train every time it came in. But you would all get in with your bags. But when you got to the bottom of town, Lino would ask you very politely, because he's an extremely polite man, would you mind getting off and walking the rest of the way up into town, because his car wouldn't make it. And he would fill the car, with the car's radiator with water down at the railway station. But by the time you began the climb, all the water had run out, and you came up with this great geyser of steam shooting out, and well, the whole thing was hysterically funny. And a little bit later, when there were several other taxi drivers here in town, they banded together and offered to buy him a new car, and he absolutely refused. He was just so fond of his old taxi that he wouldn't get rid of it.
Yeah. Well, you could really make a dramatic entrance with a geyser like that. Now, do you think that it's easier for gringos like ourselves here in Mexico, I mean, to be in relation to the government? You didn't have any problem owning your own house when you built it, did you?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the lawyer here, there was just really one lawyer, Mr. Zavala, Senior Zavala. He suggested right away to put it in the name of his secretary, my house, because he said to get permission to own it immediately was rather difficult, and in those days even, because, well, there wasn't much communication. No, I had it for some years in the name of the secretary here, and then later I was able to get FM2 papers, and after that I could have it in my own name, you see.
Oh, I see.
But there was no real problem. No, I didn't have any difficulty about it.
I see.
It's it comes and goes. Sometimes it seems to be quite simple, sometimes it seems to be quite difficult, but I think you might say that about almost anything you do in Mexico. If you have the right help and the right people, and they will give you a boost here, or you have an introduction to the proper man, you can usually get it done.
Yes.
On the other hand, if you just want to go downtown and get a paper signed, you can spend 2 days or 2 weeks doing it, because
Yes.
it's sometimes very difficult to
Yes.
find out exactly where to go.
Yes, I
I'm
think you're right.
sometimes rather horrified when I see great lines of people on the streets, trying to get their license plates straightened out or something like that.
Yeah, you really have to know the ropes and
Yes, you
know
do.
the people here.
No,
That's true.
bureaucracy in Mexico
Yeah.
is like it is everywhere else, but I think a little bit worse, maybe.
I think so. Now, there used to be, I understand, deportations of people, foreigners from Mexico in the bad old days. Does that still go on, as far as you know?
I don't know of any of that at all. Frankly, I don't
Really?
think that's true. I mean, of course, in exceptional cases where somebody is flagrantly turned out to be a robber or
Yes.
done something very really against the government, they might be deported. But generally speaking, I think that's very, very,
Very rare.
yeah.
But when you first came here, wasn't it much less rare? In other words, wasn't it much easier for a gringo to run afoul of some influential Mexican and be
Well,
deported?
we, of course, this is rather a strange story, but right in the middle of the period of the 1940s,
Yes.
the school was briefly sold to a Mexico City lawyer.
Oh, the Instituto, you mean?
No, not the Institute,
Oh,
the
the
original art school.
Oh, Bellas Artes.
Bellas Artes was sold overnight to a Mexico City lawyer whose record was not very, well, I won't go into that, but anyway, it was so difficult, I won't give you all the details, but it was so difficult to work with him that we finally were forced to go out and leave the school.
I see.
We had 132 students, and in one day, 130 of us, with all the teachers, left the school and started our own school over near the market with the help of the Secretary of Fine Arts in Mexico City.
I see.
And that made him very mad. So he went down to Mexico City and he bribed somebody in Gobernacion to have us deported.
Oh, good.
And we were shipped off down to Laredo. But fortunately, again, you see, it shows how good friends in Mexico. We had two very good friends in Mexico City. One of them was Ignacio Beteta, a general, who had come out to take painting classes with Jim Pinto here at the school. And he knew us all very well, and he knew this was perfectly ridiculous because and then the other one was Siqueiros, the great famous artist
yes.
Siqueiros,
Yeah.
who had been out giving weekend mural classes
Yes.
here. Well, he also, of course, knew us all, and he said, "This is perfect." He also knew the owner of the school, and who was for the birds, but very, very mildly. I won't go into details, but I could give you some pretty nasty ones. But in any case, they both got to work and went in to see the Secretary of Gobernacion, who was going to be the next president of Mexico, as it turned out.
Really?
And he immediately sent off wires to Laredo, where we were sitting across the river in a second, third-rate hotel, and ordered us all back into Mexico with full working permits. So just a few days after we were deported, we were back in again.
Back in, I see.
But that could, of course,
Yes.
never have happened without having some good friends.
Yes, yes.
So that was the faculty of the.
Yeah,
of
we
the
all
Renaissance?
went up, yes. I mean, the Pintos and Jack Baldwin and his wife and Brita Sundholm and
Oh, my goodness.
all kinds of people.
Were the Brooks involved?
They went up. They were deported along with us.
Yeah.
In fact, I could tell a funny story on Leonard because he's a very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
But Leonard's Spanish back in those days was not very good, and they kept telling us all the way up to the border. There was only one man who was watching us. He had one leg, but didn't make any difference. I could have gotten off the train anytime I wanted to.
Yeah.
But anyway, we got to the border, and we were still told we were going to get new papers.
Yes.
Well, Leonard, being B for Brooks, was the first person to go into the office there on the bridge, or just short of the bridge. And he went in. Pretty soon he came out all smiles. He said, "Well, I got my new papers, Stirling." And I said, "Leonard, may I see him, please?" I was pretty sure that couldn't be true. And of course he handed them to me, and right in the upper right-hand corner was in very large print, stamped "Deportado," which
Doesn't sound like new working papers
no
at all.
working papers it was not. But fortunately, as I say, we had very good friends, and they came to our
Yes.
aid right away, and that solved the problem.
Oh, yeah.
And the man who was head of the school was run out of San Miguel just a few days after we got back. I mean,
Oh.
he owed so much money all over town. He had a huge mortgage on his property up here, which is
Really?
the Atascadero Hotel,
Yeah, yeah.
which he had bought it with a very bad mortgage. He got it out of somebody in Mexico City. and everybody foreclosed on him.
Uh-huh.
His cook got the piano, the grocer got all his books, and it just worked out.
Yeah, so he got what he deserved.
Got what he deserved,
That doesn't happen always in
No,
life.
it doesn't, but in this case it did. I think that
Well.
people finally woke up to the fact that he was no good.
Very
And
good.
then who was the Bellas Artes under at that point?
Well, there was nobody then. The Bellas Artes for a while was sort of, and then it was picked up later and developed, of course, as the cultural center, which it is today, and does a wonderful job.
What about his views of San Miguel today?
Some people come and they want to talk a lot about how to compare with today, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
No.
I don't find it. I tell them I roll with the punches, which I do. I mean, I find some things a little annoying, especially the traffic. And I'm looking forward, frankly, to the development of this supermarket up above town here, because I think I'll be able to drive right out of here and go up above without getting into all the mess down in the center of the city,
Yes.
because it really has gotten to be really a severe problem.
Yeah.
I am concerned, like everybody else here, I think, should be, with the water supply and the danger to it from the sewage, and the fact that the town has not yet done anything because they just keep on building all these inexpensive housing complexes all around the edge of town, where they simply dump the sewage right outside them and let it run where it may. The one up here on the Querétaro Road runs right under the highway, open, and now they've got a whole new colony, which is just being finished, of probably 200 houses, and it's going to run right under the highway
Sure.
and just be dumped in the fields,
Yeah.
very close to where we are pumping a lot of the city water.
I know.
And I don't think that's a very good idea. But they don't seem to realize the problem. They talk about it, and everybody says, oh, we should have sewage treating plants, you know, and we should run it down this and put it over terraces and clean it up. But so far, they haven't done very much. They're so interested in, well, the population explosion for one thing, and then getting more people to come here because, as I've told them the other day in an interview I gave to one of the local Spanish newspapers, I don't think there's much point in trying to bring more tourists to San Miguel unless you can guarantee them when they get here that they'll get what they came here for, a really attractive town with a quiet center, for instance, with no automobile traffic, because I think they really should close off a number of the blocks in the center of the city.
Yes,
It will
amen
cause
to that.
problems, I know that, because of course we don't have wide streets here, and we don't have many parking lots, but they've got to develop them some way. That's the
Yeah.
only solution.
You got to.
And then have a nice quiet center where you can go into the center of town and appreciate the fine architecture, because we do have gorgeous architecture, of course. But today, with all the cars running by, you're likely to get killed if you look up at the Paroquia, because
Yeah. But were there many cars in town then when you?
none at all, practically, no. Oh no, there was nothing. There was no bank. You simply went to a man who dealt in beans, and it was called the Bean Bank. That's literally what everybody called it. We all went to the Bean Bank, and he would change a check for you, $1 check. And later on, of course, we got a bank or two, little by little. But there were almost no stores. The only one I can really remember is the Sanchez store on the main plaza. That was there. Of course, it didn't carry anything like it did today, where they just had a few little cans and beans and corn and things like that. And there were a couple of stores over near the present market in that area, and that was about all there was. There were no boutiques, nothing at all of that type.
No art galleries?
No, nothing. See, there was nobody here. When I came, I was the only American, really. I was asked to give lessons in English within 1 week after I landed here. Everybody in town wanted to learn English for some reason, and I had the craziest class you ever went to, because I had Licenciado Zavala was probably in his 60s by then or something, and I had little children, 7 and 8, all in the same class. And I realize now, of course, that the only reason they went to my class was to see what sort of gaffe I would make, because I couldn't speak good Spanish at all. And so I would stagger along as best I could, trying to teach English to this mixed bag of people. It was really very, very funny. And of course, I did say some very ridiculous things. I have a very marvelous story on myself. I was finishing the house right here where you're sitting now one Sunday, and I was painting the walls. There was not a stick of furniture in the house yet, but I was painting the walls myself to get ahead. I heard a knock on the door, and I went to the door, and there were 4 of the most attractive young ladies in town. There was a member of the Zavala family, a member of the Lamberti family, a member of the Garcia family, and one other, I don't remember. Anyway, they had come in to pay their respects to the first American to settle here. So I invited them in, but there really wasn't much to see. I mean, the patio wasn't finished, but I took them around a little bit. And I tried to explain in my broken Spanish that I was going to have a garden here and that there. And then I realized they were about to leave. And I wanted to say something polite. And I thought the best thing I could possibly say was, I do hope you'll come back again when the house is furnished. Well, I didn't know how to say it, because what I did when I got to the front door, I shook hands with all of them, and I said, and I do hope you'll come back when the beds are in.
Did they react?
They blushed.
I think that's a wonderful story.
What was the attraction then? Was it young
I
man
think I
from
just liked
Mexico?
Mexico, basically. I really did. I never liked Chicago. I mean, I never liked big cities, put it that way.
Yeah.
And I had really fallen in love with Mexico in the 2 trips I'd made in 1935 and again in 1937. And I just felt that this was a nice, relaxed way of living. And I didn't really know, of course, I was going to get involved with an art school. But somehow I fell in with that, and that was, of course, what made me stay.
Did you say you went to the Art Institute?
Yes, I studied in the Art Institute for 3 years after graduating from college. I studied art and archaeology in Princeton for 4 years and graduated, and then I took 3 years of postgraduate study at the Art Institute.
That would have been the late 30s then, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, you're off on a trip tomorrow. Is that right, or is it this afternoon?
No, it won't be till Saturday morning.
Not till
It's the day
Saturday
after
morning.
Tomorrow.
I see.
I've got still a few
Yeah.
more errands to do, but not very
Could you tell us a little bit about this trip and
Well,
where you're going?
I wish I could, because I don't really know.
It's
A good many years ago, maybe 15 or 20,
Yeah.
I went to a little village called Valparaiso in the state of Zacatecas,
Yeah.
and from there I tried to go inland across the Sierras, but without having much of an idea what I was doing. Well, it soon developed that there was nothing where I was going, because we just ended up in some bushes. The road ran out. And then just 2 years ago, I went in from the other side, the Pacific side, a short distance, about 50 kilometers, but I didn't want to try to go any further. I just went in to get one orchid that I was interested in, which I did find, and came out. Now I would like to try and go all the way across, although I'm informed, but not very definitely, that there may have been a bad landslide this last winter.
Really?
And I may not be able to get through all the way, but I think I can get as far with luck as a village called Jesus Maria de los Cora, which is in the very heart of the Huichol Cora Indian area. They are very, very interesting people. They're very isolated. They don't come out to the outside at all of their own country,
Really?
except occasionally 2 of them will come out to look for peyote. They come all the way to San Luis Potosí and go up in the hills there and look for peyote, because they have a cult of the
peyote.
hallucination business. And I understand their annual fiestas in Easter week. And I've seen 1 or 2 pictures of it, and they have marvelous masks, apparently.
I see.
And if I happen to get in as far as Jesus Maria, I'm going to have some, I hope, nice pictures if they'll let me take them, because they also are very, very shy about cameras, and I've been told that they will absolutely not allow you to take the cameras in or to shoot pictures, or they'll stone you or
Yes.
break your camera in
Yeah,
2.
we've heard of that.
So I'm just going to wait and find out.
Is this going to be a walking trip?
No, I'm going to go into my van,
In a van?
because no, I couldn't do that by walking. I've done a lot of walking trips in my life,
Yeah.
including 6 of a month long each time in Nepal.
Really?
But I'm past the age of wanting to strain my legs to that point. No, I'm going to drive into my van, and we're going to camp out at night, which I'm taking with a grain of salt, because my aging bones rather like the comfort of my bed and my electric blanket and a few things like that. But I won't have any electric blanket on this, but I am taking a foam rubber cushion pad, which I will sleep on, and I'm covered with a blanket. I hope I can stay warm enough.
Sounds like a
You're
deluxe
not
trip.
going alone, then, you say?
Oh, heavens, no. I don't do things alone, no. No, I'm way past the age of changing automobile tires. I still enjoy driving, and I often do when I go out to these ranches, but I always take somebody from my house or a friend or somebody to go along with me, because I couldn't take a chance on doing that and being stuck out on the hills all by myself.
When should we expect you back before we call out the whatever
Well, I
the
think
equivalent of the Marines are?
Allow 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
I think it'd be wise to get a helicopter, because they'd probably spot us better, because this road, I understand, is perfectly terrible. I just bought a shovel at the recommendation of somebody who has actually made the trip.
Really?
He made it last year with his family in a small Volkswagen,
Good.
but he said it was perfectly beautiful scenery, but the road was terrible.
I see.
He cracked the oil pan, and all the oil ran out of his thing, and he was luckily able to get to a few ranches and buy a little oil, which got him out to the town where you can start from, and then he was able to fix his oil pan and get home.
My goodness.
But I think,
Well,
I hope that won't happen to me. I've got enough food. I hope I've made out menus for 6 days, but I'm going to take along some extras
wonderful.
because I have a feeling that if I ever do get to Jesus Maria, I may want to stay there for 2 or 3 days to see
yeah.
this fiesta.
Wonderful. Oh my gosh. This is in Zacatecas again. Where you're going?
I start in Zacatecas, but then I get into a corner of Durango, a corner of Jalisco, and a large chunk of Nayarit. So there will be four different states in the space of about 200 kilometers, I guess. They all come together. I don't know who designed these, the limits of the states in Mexico, but they must have been drunk when they did it, I think.
Thank you very much,
Sure.
Stirling. Well, we'll.
Talking about today, particularly to you, I mean, I don't think we want to discuss the sewage problem.